Are we live?
Go for it, Jen.
All right. All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you all for joining us today for our first panel discussion of the Save and Raid event. The theme of this panel is Global Crisis Resources, and we'll be chatting with leaders from several suicide prevention crisis centers and services. My name is Jen Owens, and I'm the Director of Programs at Save. And joining me today and moderating our discussion is Courtney Covey-Lewis. She is a mental health registered nurse and part of the Save and Raid organizing team. We're honored to moderate this panel of international leaders today who have dedicated their careers to supporting individuals in crisis.
Before we introduce our panelists, I do want to acknowledge that suicide is a deeply personal and sensitive topic, especially for those who are struggling or have experienced a suicide attempt or have lost someone to suicide. Please, please, please take care of yourself during this discussion. And if you or someone you know is in crisis, please reach out for support. Throughout today's conversation, we're going to be sharing a link to Twitch's crisis services directory. If a crisis service isn't available in your area, please connect with a trusted friend or a loved one. And remember, you are valued, you are needed, and we want you here with us.
Thanks, Courtney. All right. So as I mentioned, we have an exceptional group of panelists today who will share their insights on how their lifelines operate and the solutions that they use to meet the needs of individuals across different cultures and regions. So let's begin by introducing our panelists. So first we have Grant Riewe. He's the Chief Technology Officer at Vibrant Emotional Health. Vibrant is the organization in the United States that runs the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Grant joined Vibrant in 2022 as Chief Technology Officer, overseeing all technology programs, products, and services. He is a strategy-driven technologist with deep experience developing and executing big bang innovation strategies for organizations of all sizes, from Fortune 100 to startups to the public sector. Grant's focus is on the ethical and human-centric application of technology and effective customer experience. Welcome, Grant.
Thank you.
Next, we have Allison Crawford. Allison's the Chief Medical Officer at 988 Suicide Crisis Helpline in Canada. In addition to Chief Medical Officer at 988 Canada, Allison is also a psychiatrist and a professor in the Departments of Psychiatry and the School of Public Health at the University of Toronto. She also works on suicide prevention and life promotion in the circumpolar north and is University of the Arctic Chair in Public Mental Health and Digital Innovation. Welcome, Allison. Next, we have Casey Starr. Casey's co-executive director of Samaritans and today representing Befrienders Worldwide. She has a background in developmental psychology and holds advanced degrees from NYU and the University of Edinburgh. With over 10 years of experience in suicide prevention, Casey is dedicated to community-based approaches, embedding volunteer-driven crisis support, education, and postvention resources into communities. Welcome, Casey. And last but not least, we have Miriam Vandriel. She's a registered healthcare psychologist at 113 Suicide Prevention in the Netherlands. Together with her colleagues, she's responsible for the quality and development of the care and support they provide at the Helpline and through online therapy. So for those of you tuning in today, if you have any questions for the panelists throughout the conversation, please drop those into the chat on Twitch, I believe. Our awesome Save and Raid team will hold those until the last 15, 20 minutes or so, and we'll do our best to get to as many as we can.
So, suicide is a global challenge, and crisis centers play a vital role in saving lives. Our overarching goal today, our goal in today's discussion, is to help our audiences get a better understanding of crisis services and to demystify what happens when someone contacts a crisis service, with the hopes that more people will feel empowered to reach out with support when they need it. So to start us off, we'd like to hear what kind of services does your organization provide for people in crisis? Maybe Casey, we can start with you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And it's great to be here today. And it's great to have an audience who are so motivated to learn more about this and to support this really important cause. In terms of the services that we offer, at Samaritans, which is part of Befrienders Worldwide, which is a global network of over 400 centers across 40 countries, we provide basically volunteer-based suicide prevention. So all of the centers across these countries use community-based volunteers to provide services tailored to the needs of those communities. So we have In the US, we definitely have hotlines. In the UK, we have hotlines. Where you're calling in 24/7 to talk to someone. There's chat, there's texting. But in other countries where maybe it's less comfortable to talk on the phone, maybe people don't have the amount of privacy, we have drop-in centers. We have, places where you would meet at a certain location and you'll meet volunteers at that location on that date to be able to talk and connect. And the basis of what we do is tied to this idea of befriending, which is about connection. It's about, I can't change the fact that it's going to get dark sometimes, but if you're afraid of the dark, I can sit there with you and hold your hand. And that we learn that it's not so much about fixing someone's problems, but being able to companion them through it, just to let them know that they're not alone. And I would say that that's really the crux of the work that we do at Samaritans and at Befrienders, is to just be there for someone.
Thank you. Allison, do you want to speak to the work your organization does?
Sure, and I hear a lot of similar themes, and it's also very connected to what Grant and Miriam do. But we have a crisis line 988 in Canada, so it's a phone and text-based line in our region. It's a bit more narrow. It's really focused on suicide prevention, and it's funded by our federal government. So it's at the same time, it's meant to be very community-based. So we've left it, instead of setting up a central call center, our partners are across the country. That way, and it's a mix of volunteer and paid responders, although I would say we're moving more towards paid folks, but really to try to get people from every aspect of life. These are not trained healthcare providers, they're trained responders. So to get people from across communities to participate in suicide prevention, which I think it's really important to keep that ethos. And I think that's very similar to what Casey was talking about.
Grant, maybe you can speak next.
Well, our story is going to be similar to Allison's. So Vibrant does many things, but in the United States, we have our own 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, which is the evolution of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which we were also the administrator of, dating back to 2005. So as Allison said, here in the US, it's like what we have in Canada. This is about suicide intervention and prevention. Roughly 80% of the contacts that come in to 988 in the United States are not about suicidal ideation or imminent risk of self-harm. They are about the precursors towards suicidality, financial distress, housing distress, domestic abuse are all precursors towards suicidal ideation. And that is the bulk of the interactions that we receive on the Lifeline. The Lifeline is on track to receive north of 7.5 million contacts in the US this year. That's across voice calls, text, chat, video, phone. We also do multi-language support. Vibrant is part of the network as well as the administrator. So we serve the city and state of New York. And then as Casey outlined in some of the community programs, we are active in the community in the greater New York metropolitan area, all 5 boroughs. We also have community centers and engage on particular programs, thinking about interventions with youth and family interventions that we can do up to including psychiatric care.
Thank you. And last but not least, Miriam.
Thank you so much for having me. I think I'm the only one not native English speaker, so I'll try to do my best. I think my story is a little bit like the story of Allison, because 113 is a suicide prevention line. But as you know, the Netherlands is quite a small country, so we are based on one central point in the Netherlands, and that's enough. So we provide 24/7 anonymously and free care to people who are in suicidal need. And you can call us, you can chat with us. And I think what maybe makes us a little bit more special is that we also provide free online therapy. So in which you can work with a counselor on your suicidal thoughts, suicidal behavior in 10 sessions with cognitive behavioral therapy, which is very nice. And what we also provide is like a helpline for professionals, so people can call us if they are in need, like professionals in healthcare, but also professionals in like every other, thing you can think of. And our helpline and the online therapy is part of a bigger organization. So 113 is the organization for suicide prevention in the Netherlands, which is also involved like research, training, marketing, communication, media, and things like that. That's it.
Thank you. So I'm wondering if you would like to, if someone wanted to walk us through from kind of the perspective of someone using your services, what would you experience if you picked up the phone and dialed 113 or 988 or Casey? How would someone access Samaritan services? Can we kind of talk about it from the perspective of someone who would be using these services? What could they expect?
Sure. So at Samaritans, we're unique in the US because we have centers that are both in the 988 network and centers that are not. And so it would depend on which center you wanted to call. Obviously, I think Grant and Allison said that, one of the important things is that network of centers. So it's not having just a centralized one place where your call goes. It's, if you're going to get a referral, it's great to get a referral that's local to you. And so making sure that you're calling, this, and so 988 does that, it routes you. Will, and I'm sure Grant can speak more to that, so I apologize. But you would call the service if you were going to call, and you would be greeted by someone. For us, it's always a volunteer. They're professionally trained in crisis communications and suicide prevention, but they are just a volunteer from the community. And 24/7, they're there. They'll chat with you. They will, ask you what's going on, what has you calling, what's been happening in your life. When you call Samaritans, you'll hear a ringtone. If you can't get through, you hear a busy signal, which is something we're actually looking to change because we've learned that people don't actually know what a busy signal is anymore, but we want them to know that there's a person on the phone. You're not talking to an AI, you're not talking to a robot, you are talking to another human. And that's really important to us. At some point in every conversation, no matter what you say your reason for calling is, we ask you about suicide. And we'll ask that question directly. And sometimes we find that people think that you have to be suicidal to call the hotline. And Grant, you said the 80% of the calls aren't someone who's in active crisis. And we find a very similar breakdown as well. But sometimes someone will be, at the beginning of the call, they'll be like, I am suicidal, or they'll say, I'm not suicidal. And for us, no matter what you say at the start of that call, we're still going to ask you the same question of, well, what has you calling today? What's going on? And then after we build that rapport, after we actually, kind of get to know what's going on with you, then we'll ask you again, based on all of the things we've been talking about, has it gotten to the point that you're thinking about suicide, or are you feeling that way today? And for us, we always say, even if you're not feeling that way, if you ever did, you could tell us. And sometimes people will start the call, they say they're not feeling that way. We ask the question, they say they're not feeling that way. And then maybe 5 minutes later, they say, actually, I am. And there's a lot of hesitation sometimes, and there's a lot of big feelings around even disclosing that, even on a suicide hotline. And for us, it's all about, I'm not so concerned about whether you are or you aren't, because suicide is not just a state that you are in. It is, as as we're talking about, it is so many different factors coming together that can kind of take a person to a point where they're feeling out of options, where they're feeling like they're suffering and they don't know how to handle it. And I like to think about a crisis as kind of, on one hand, here's everything I have to deal with, and on the other hand, here is the tools that I have to do that. And at any point for any one of us, those scales can tip. And so for me, when I'm thinking about this, we get calls from every different type of person. And it's really just about, where are those scales right now in this moment? And I would say that that's kind of what the experience is like.
Maybe, Courtney, I'll throw in here on what else it's like to call 988, and it'll be similar in Canada or the US or probably the Netherlands. If you dial 988, the first thing you're going to hear is an IVR menu. It's just a little selection menu. Actually, the first announcement you will hear is in Spanish, asking you if you would like Spanish language support, press 2. Numero dos, please. Then we will go through the rest of the menu. Option 1 is for our veterans or active duty service members in the US to go and connect with the Veterans Crisis Line, which is actually operated by the Veterans Health Administration in partnership with the VA. Option number 3 is for LGBTQIA specific support and allows people who wish to have a conversation with people who identify that they do or understand those specific risks or needs or concerns, get support. And then in one state, and only one state in the United States, we actually have Native American specific support, so culturally rooted support. This is available in the state of Washington, and it's available through a Press 4. The call is then routed. So if you pick one of those sub-networks, you will get routed to a center somewhere in the United States. There are 220 centers in the United States. Casey represents some of those. And those centers are all trained in all modalities. If you don't press one of those options, you'll actually be routed to the center that's physically closest to you, no matter where you're at. And so in the last year, we have done a lot to partner with the FCC, which is the entity in the US government that controls telecommunications, and identify approximately where you are. And when I say approximately, this isn't like 911 and precise location. This is general location. So where you are is where the county that you're in the US. And so we will know then where we can route your call and get you to that help in your community. If you access through chat, which would be on 988lifeline.org, that's in our chat here today. If you go through text, which is just texting to 988, the experience is very similar. We'll ask you a couple questions up front that are allowing you to express what are some of these thoughts that you're having? How are you feeling? As Casey described, it's helpful for us to know that. We're going to ask you as soon as we are connected with you, but it's helpful to hear your assessment. For video phone, also accessible through 988lifeline.org, you'll also have to ask a few questions, and then you will connect with someone pretty quickly. Most of our connections happen in about 20 seconds. That's great for any type of service. That's for 988. And then you shouldn't feel rushed to leave the conversation. Stay with the conversation as long as you need to. Sometimes when you call, you kind of feel that pressure to get off the phone. That's not what these services, at least from the hotline perspective, are supposed to be. We want to be with you as long as we need to be with you to help you get the help you need, help feel better in that moment. And for context, our average call is 20 to 25 minutes long. That's a pretty significant phone call for those of us who don't spend a lot of time on the phone, but it's available for you. Our long call, you're not going to break that record. It's over 8 hours, but you are welcome to stay with us on the line as long as you need to.
A lot of commonality, obviously, Grant, with 988 in Canada. And I want to pick up on something both you and Casey said. Just we know what some of the risk factors are for suicide. We also know what some of the protective factors are. And I think you both highlighted the importance of, it's not a one size fits all. It's really important that services like ours engage with communities, have services that are adapted to, designed with, we have a lot of engagement of people with lived experience, a lot of youth engagement, very diverse people from across Canada involved in every aspect of designing and evaluating our service. And I think that helps us do the kinds of things that Grant and Casey described. We also have different options that people can press. We have a First Nations, Inuit, and Métis specific service available from anywhere in Canada, French language service as well as English, because our country is bilingual. But we're also doing research, working with people who've actually used the service to understand their journey from before they even call 988 all the way through to understand what their needs and experiences are and whether we're meeting them, because we don't know sometimes. We have to continue to evolve that. And slightly different thing that came to mind is a lot of people worry about 911, and we've all, I think, brought up 911 in some capacity or another. And in a very small percentage of cases, if somebody is in active distress and we're worried about them ending their life, we will engage 911. But I think far more common what's happening now is we're working with 911 so that we take the calls for people who are having suicidality, that we are actually trained to respond to, much more so than the operators at 911. So I think we're expanding those kinds of emergency services.
I might add on to that, Allison, not to jump ahead of you, Miriam, but in the United States, we have partnerships with 911 centers across the country, which is available where there is a need. But in most cases, we partner with mobile crisis teams. So this is unarmed psychiatric support and response. It is anchored in a lot of the large hospitals in the United States. And it's more situationally appropriate to someone who is experiencing a mental, emotional, or behavioral health crisis. So when you do contact, I'm just going to underscore what Allison said, like there isn't a desire to connect with law enforcement where unnecessary. There isn't the desire to dispatch someone here unless it is clear that you are really at risk and we cannot help you. And then there is a conversation before there is any sort of dispatch here. And we have a lot of options in the US with mobile crisis teams and then partnerships with other entities to get you that help in person as soon as we can get it to you.
I'm really glad you spoke to that, because that is something that comes up a lot, is that there's a fear of reaching out because people may have some misconceptions about if they call a crisis line, they're going to be, cops swarming their house, or an ambulance is going to be sent, and that's not the level of help that they need, or they may have some fear or some bad experiences there. So I really appreciate you speaking to what that looks like, especially when you do have to engage maybe more direct intervention for someone's safety.
And I think just one thing to add on is that when you're calling a crisis line like the ones that we're talking about, the person who's on the other end of the phone is there and fully equipped to talk about suicide. When you call 911, a 911 operator doesn't have the same level of experience, of training, and of comfortability. When you talk to a friend, it can, it can feel really scary to hear someone disclose that. And so one of the things that we see often, we do a lot of training in schools, is that things get escalated unnecessarily because there isn't that comfortability. And it's why it's so important to call these lines, because if we're talking 80% of the calls aren't even explicitly focused on suicidality. And of the 20%, I'm sure, it's a small percentage that we're talking about who are in this imminent risk active crisis. And we have a lot of tools at our disposal to do collaborative problem solving well before we're talking about engaging even a mobile crisis unit, let alone 911. And so I think one of the things to rely on is that there is this huge spectrum of ability to help here. And I think it's really important to emphasize that.
So, add a little bit of European information. So I think I recognize a lot about the other stories. I think what I can add from 113 is that if you call us or if you chat with us, I think the first question, like on the little tape you hear, is if is your life in danger, and if yes, then please reach out to it's not 911, but it's 112 here. And after that, if you are connected to one of our counselors, which are, I think, like 85% is a paid professional, 15% is volunteers. We had a big switch in that. We started with volunteers, and then during the years, we evolved in like paid professionals with a healthcare background. And then I think always our first questions are focused on the safety of the help seeker. Like, is there anything happened? Did you take anything, or did you use anything, or did you do anything? Are you on a unsafe place or whatever? So we try to get them safe and have a talk about that. If not, or if the person doesn't want to, then we just ask the question, okay, but do you still want to have the conversation? So the autonomy is really at the help seeker. And after that, we try to really like follow the needs of what is needed at that point. So if you need a listening, just someone to listen, we can do that. If you want some help in how can I talk about my suicidal thoughts with my friend or my mother or my GP, or we can do that. So whatever you want, we really are trying to provide it to you. And I recognize, I think, like, the conversation takes about 20 to 25 minutes. A chat takes a little bit longer, like 45 minutes. So we have the time, but you don't need an hour to have a good conversation. So in our conversations, also like a good focus. So what do you need now? So what made you call, or what made you chat with us at this moment is very important. So we want to help you at this point. Like you said, Casey, like suicidal thought, suicidal behavior is like very, well, like this. So it's really important to focus on that moment. And that's what we do.
Thank you. Just wanted to let you know that, because you can't see the Twitch chat right now, there are so many hearts and so many people talking about how, yeah, exactly, about how valuable these services are, and you know, folks saying that they wish they had known or would have had access to this, because this would have been you know, something that would have been beneficial to them or a friend. But there's just so much love and appreciation for the work that's being done, that's being shared right now. So just want to take a little pause to let you know about all the love coming your way right now.
Courtney, this isn't on kind of our list of questions, but it kind of popped up. I just wanted to make sure, just to ask this. So when we're thinking about who can access these services, a lot of times people will come across a friend or a loved one and they don't know how to help. How does your service support someone who's trying to support someone else? I know you all kind of touched on this a little bit, but I just really want to emphasize that, like, you don't have to be the one in crisis to reach out for these services. I just want to make sure that that's true for everyone here.
It's certainly
Yeah,
true in the
that's a
United
message.
States. Sorry, Allison, go ahead. I'll go ahead. It's certainly true in the United States, and that's part of the intention of the service. I was actually just talking to a family member of someone who was in crisis yesterday, and that person expressed that they thought the biggest benefit was for the whole family, 4 or 5 of whom had actually called the line to get support for themselves for how they were reacting to the individual who did not engage in self-harm, but was really feeling quite badly. So in the US, of course, reach out, call, chat, text, not just for the person in crisis, but for everyone that's around them, even including, you know, you encounter someone who is on the street or around your work and you need help in that moment on how to have a conversation. 988, right there for you. Sorry, Allison, for speaking over you.
No, I think we both had similar thoughts. In Canada, we always say no wrong door. It's like, if you feel you need help, if you think someone else needs help, don't try to problem solve. Should I call? Shouldn't I call? Just call or text. There's no wrong door. Actually, only about 10% of our interactions relate to someone seeking support for someone else. But we're doing advertising around that so that that comfort level grows, because those are often the change makers in communities, in relationships that do call, and they're often very uniquely poised to help people and support people. So you're not just doing a service for yourself, you're enhancing your own skills to support other people. And it's a really valid reason to reach out.
Absolutely. I would also say, oh, sorry, Miriam. Okay. I would also say that, you know, for anyone who has a loved one who is thinking about suicide, that is a heavy thing to deal with no matter what. So whether you're looking specifically for resources for that person or you just need to talk yourself, it's worth it to call. These lines are here for that. And one of the other things that we do at Samaritans and Befrienders is we do a lot of education. And one of the programs we have is called What to Say When You Don't Know What to Say. And it's designed for friends and family members who have just had someone disclose, or they're worried about someone and they want to approach a tough conversation and they don't know what to say. And I would say that looking at what kind of resources are around, because, you know, I would argue there's not really a right thing to say. There's maybe some things we don't want to say, but there's not a right thing to say. And it's how do we get comfortable with that? And maybe the first way to do that is to make a phone call and talk to someone else about it. Call one of these lines.
Yeah, I really recognize that also from 113. We talk to a lot of mothers, dads, friends, daughters, sons who are worried about their loved ones. So like Casey said, if you think of someone who is in suicidal stress, or you don't know, but you want to talk about it, please call, please chat with us. And we also have, like you, Casey, you said, we provide a training online. It's just a 1 hour free training. I think if I have to translate it, it would be like talk about it. So you learn how to talk and especially how to ask the question, because people are afraid of asking directly, do you have suicidal thoughts? And this training like really provides you concrete steps just in 1 hour to learn about it. And also we always say, you know, we are not the only organization, we can't do it on our own. So we need everyone. And that therefore also it's very important to welcome the loved ones of people who are in suicidal stress. So please do.
You know, I also wonder for people who are listening, you know, to remember that whoever they're calling, we are also people just like you. And often many of us are doing this work because we've been touched by loss in our own lives. And very recently, and that never ends, very recently I was at Thanksgiving dinner and we had a particularly large crowd, and someone in our more distant family said to me, "Oh, 988 is great. I had to call that." And I said, well, number one, why didn't you call me? But I'm really glad you had that experience, and to know that anyone could be touched by this stress or distress in their lives.
So questions about training, since Miriam, you brought that up. A question that came up when we were talking about other emergency responders and the sort of training that folks who work in these crisis lines have that maybe a 911 dispatcher doesn't have. A question that came up in the chat was, you know, what would it take for a dispatcher to get basic training in having a conversation about someone who might be in a suicidal crisis? And just wondering about your thoughts kind of more broadly. You know, are there high priority training needs or things that people could do to get more comfortable so that we can all be doing better about this in our own spaces?
Yeah, so I think, well, at least in the Netherlands, there is sort of free training. And I think, if I heard correctly, I think in other countries as well. So, and also if you want to a little bit into the topic, there are a lot of more trainings that, at least in the Netherlands, 113 provides. So we call them gatekeeper training. So we want everyone in the country to be a gatekeeper. And that's a little bit more about how do you do it, what things you can say, what things maybe better not to say about that. I think if you really want to work at 113, an elevator training is really necessary. So that's what we provide, especially focused on suicidal, conversations. but also just, have a look at the website. You can see a lot of like movies, a lot of text information. And I think, as Casey said, the best thing you can do is to talk about it. I mean, you don't have to be great at it. Just ask, just be there, be present. It's not rocket science, but it's just do it.
In the US, kind of looking more broadly at kind of where are those training priorities, we certainly have a national strategy for suicide prevention that was released last year. And embedding suicide prevention, kind of upstream suicide prevention in healthcare settings so that it's, anytime you're going to see if we say that we have mental and physical health parity, if we're talking about kind of this importance, then making sure that healthcare providers are also trained in asking these questions. In terms of the more direct question of what would it take for 911 dispatchers to have, robust suicide prevention training, I think it's really from my perspective, a technical thing where a 911 dispatcher is responding to a huge spectrum of physical emergencies. And the type of work that it takes to kind of go through a very, thoughtful suicide assessment can take more time. And I think that the reason we have discrete services is because they've performed discrete functions. Not that 911 dispatchers aren't actually trained, because a lot of them are. It's just more, what is the function of that service? As opposed to, it's not we should just create one increasingly comprehensive thing. Allison said it, and I'll reiterate it. It's not one size fits all. We need to be nimble enough to respond. 911 is an emergency response service, very specific to such a wide variety of things. I think that's why 988 and other suicide crisis hotlines are more able to respond. That would be my very, direct response to that.
We could kind of pivot over to a question that came through in the chat, which we think is really important. The world today is very interconnected, and this commenter is noting that you make contacts across continents, and I think this event is kind of a good example of that. We have, truly international representation, in this panel, but also in the folks that are watching this roundtable discussion. Our commenter notes that they're in Germany, but they know trans people in the United States who are currently very scared and even, suicidal due to some of the political changes that have been happening. They're wondering if there's a way for them as a person in Germany to contact a service in the United States if they know that the person that they're concerned about is a U.S. resident. Is there a way to cross borders and boundaries for suicide prevention, since we're all becoming so interconnected?
Well, maybe I'll give a start at that. So our services are somewhat nationalized at this point, which is why Canada and the United States both use 988. For anybody that's near the border, you don't have to worry about a different number. And we actually do pass calls back and forth between both of those systems. That's less true if we're talking about someone who is in Germany, as the commenter said. If you dialed 988, you actually wouldn't be able to get into the U.S. or Canadian service as it is right now. Now, if you're physically in the United States, that's different, but you can't really call from Germany in. You can do some fun things with VPN if you want to, but that's really the national service. If we're talking about someone who identifies as trans, there's the Trans Lifeline, which is available here in the US, and that is accessible. Their website is accessible. Or the Trevor Project, which helps all LGBTQIA youth in particular, so under 25. They also have an international presence, and they will also be able to refer to other organizations that can provide access. So the lifelines are sometimes not the best way to get cross-country access. That being said, the United Nations has launched a global task force on mental health And we are looking at this problem. It's been in this task force been in existence for about a year, but we are looking to put a report out in another year or two, which would direct members of the UN to actually look at interoperability across countries, as the US and Canada have, so that we can actually give people access to care and route that appropriately across country borders.
Thank you so much.
We've got about 15 minutes left. I know we had one more question on our list.
We did have a question that hasn't made it on our list, and it's for Allison specifically. Came through in chat. The question is, have you ever knocked over that beautiful stack of books behind you?
I shouldn't make people worry for my safety. It's actually a bookcase, but yeah, so I'm safe for now. And if I ever decide to read all of those books, then I'll just have to replenish them.
Thank you.
That was great. That was a really
Chat
great...
wanted to know.
Yeah.
Perfect moment.
You know, actually, there's something that's been circulating in my mind while we've been talking, because I'm thinking about all of you out there doing this very cool day. And amazing that you could take the time to join for this more sobering conversation. But I think there is something that everyone can do for suicide prevention, and that's to be aware that, so we've already talked about, don't be afraid to ask people, talk about it, keep those lines of communication open. But also the way that we talk about suicide as a society has a huge impact on suicide. Speaking of stories and books, positive stories of hope. You know, Casey, I love how you talked about those scales. It's not like, oh, you had suicidal thoughts and then you didn't. We know that a large percentage of youth in particular have suicidal thinking that can get quite serious. But it does fluctuate, and reasons for living are more important, in fact, than reasons for dying. And by the way we talk about suicide, stories of hope, sharing your stories of how you got through, how you persevered, all the strengths that you bring, is something that we can all do. And that hope is just as contagious. And these are trying times for many people. So sharing stories of hope is really important.
I really want to second that, Allison. I think it's such an important message, and that the stories of hope and resilience don't have to also be grand, huge things. When I think about hope, I think about what moment in my day were things a little less bad? What moment was the pain a little bit less? And I want to go into that. It's not about this huge grand gesture. It's just about finding those moments. And I think that is something everyone, we often do for ourselves. We should do for other people, especially when we're talking to someone who might be struggling.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Also, in the Netherlands, we try to also shift a little bit. So we launched this website. I'm not sure how to translate it correctly, but it's really like keep hope, keep having hope, something like that. So we interview people, so share their stories, and like you said, Casey, it doesn't have to be like big, and but also like with the acknowledgement of the despair. So it was really there. Now I'm quite okay, or a little bit better. And this is how I got there. And it most of the time it has to do something with like this teacher from school asked me something, or then finally this my friend said, "Hey, I'm not feeling well. How are you doing?" So it's most of the time it's very small, but it's very nice to read it so you're not alone, because feeling alone is very related to suicidal thoughts, and so not feeling alone anymore, and reading the stories of others and be inspired by that can be just the thing you needed that day.
So for the last few minutes of this conversation, we've got about 10 minutes before we need to start thinking about rating out to the next player in the game. I would love to hear what is either, coming next for the organization, or what would you like to see in the future? What would be your perfect future state if you had unlimited resources? What if you had to create the best possible crisis line you could? What would you want?
Well, that one's easy for me. Our mission is to end suicide. It doesn't need to happen. Doesn't need to be a choice. And so that is our mission. So my perfect future is to not have to be a service, because people have the support in their community, with their friends and their family. They know how to talk about it. They have access to the resources that they need, so that it doesn't have to get to that point. So that's our mission, is to no longer have this mission that we share. We've got quite a ways to go to that point. But we're on the path. Ways in which we are growing in the United States for 988. We need more crisis counselors to take our interaction. So we're, Casey and her friends and the volunteers that sometimes get certified and then come up into the rest of the network are great. We want those folks. Here we have, roughly 10 or 12,000 in the United States, and we probably need closer to 40 or 50,000 if we were going to serve the entirety of the need. So that's part of it. There are lots of people who don't reach out for help because it doesn't feel like a service for them, right? People who don't identify as needing help. In the United States, some of those highly at-risk populations that are not engaging with help are middle-aged white men like myself, predominantly in rural areas, that experience loneliness in a deep, deep way and need to have communities of support around them. Another at-risk group are Black youth, particularly boys, in that late elementary school stage, and finding a pathway that works for them. A call doesn't work, a text doesn't work, a chat doesn't work. What is the way in which we might engage with these youth so that they can have that support? Those are the things that we're thinking about on the near-term horizon. And we are trying things and expanding everything that we can do from the United States perspective. But again, our goal, our mission is to no longer need to be a service here, so that everybody has the support embedded in their community.
I mean, ditto. There's lots of middle ground, which is what I'm gonna I really reaching out to populations, creating a space of belonging where people feel like the service is for them, really resonated with me, Grant. And I hope our work is done someday eventually. But in the meantime, the other thing that I think about is that we continue to be evidence-based, which is not the same thing as saying that we're just going to be like a checklist or rote, but that at least we know. Casey, you mentioned the asking people if they are experiencing suicidality in the first part of an interaction. That is based in evidence, that we all do that because we know that it is very important to ask directly. It's very important to ask early, that it doesn't harm people, it doesn't cause harm. But we actually only know that because of the research that's been done. And I think, community-based, super important, but so is bringing in people with expertise to do that research so that we can continue to improve.
Certainly for Samaritans for Befrienders, it's we share that vision. We would love to be out of work. That is the goal. But as we work towards that, definitely more community involvement. We have a saying at Samaritans that suicide prevention starts with me. Whether you're thinking about suicide yourself or not, it doesn't matter. It starts with me, and kind of taking that route. The other area that we're really working on expanding in the next few years is we have always offered support groups for people who have lost loved ones to suicide. And recently, during COVID, we put those support groups online. And recently we've expanded also into people who are living with thoughts of suicide and people who are friends and family of people who are living with thoughts of suicide, to create these structured, facilitated support groups that anybody anywhere can attend online. And so that's really one of the ways we're looking to meet these needs, where we find that people really resonate being able to talk openly about their suicidality without the fear of now the police are going to be called, with people who actually get it. And so that's one of the spaces that we're looking to go to.
Yeah, I think I'm going to repeat a little bit on the other story, because I think for us, it's of course the same. We're quite a young organization. We're only 15 years old. So, well, at least I think we're quite young. And I think also like the shift from 113 to like the whole community that they take over everywhere, that will be our dream. So we can, like think about things and maybe some policies or whatever, but not like really acting on it. So we really want the community to, take the responsibility, and also that it's more like normal to talk about this, normal to ask about, and also that the healthcare system provides in the care that people need, and you don't have like waiting lists for a year or something like that. I know sometimes it feels like an illusion, but if I had all the money there is, then I would really also focus on that, because I think for us, we talk to so many people who are waiting for the right healthcare for like months and months, and then their suicidal thoughts only get worse, which feels so, I don't know, powerless to listen to, because you think there is the care, but just not now. So I think we also have to do that together. We're just one part of a bigger picture.
So, in closing thoughts, if there are any last comments or any last takeaways you wanted to share with this audience, I'd love to hear them.
You deserve support. You are worthy, you're deserving of support, and there are people that really want to genuinely and authentically connect with you and support you and collaborate with you in your journey, whoever you are.
You are not alone as well. Please know that you're not alone, not in your thoughts, not in the way you feel, and also physically you're not alone. We're there everywhere around the world. And please contact us. At least try.
I just wanted to make sure everyone knows, at least here in this chat, the resources that you've mentioned throughout this conversation have been put into the Twitch chat for people to access. If you think of any other resources, later, feel free to share them with us and we can get that out to these audience. But amazing conversation today. Just on behalf of Courtney, myself, and the whole Save&Raid team, we want to extend our gratitude and our for all of you and your dedication to this life-saving work. So yeah, thank you so much for being here today. Let's get back to the game.
Yeah, what do we say? Go raid or like enjoy raiding?
That's a good question, Courtney. What do we say?
Well, we vamp for a little bit because our next participant isn't live yet, and we don't want to dump everybody into a channel without anything happening.
Do we have a Save&Raid motto? Do we say anything, or is it like based on the game? Do we have a?
Well, this year's tagline is Sanctuary, which is a reference to the one of the main locations in Diablo, which is the game that we are playing, and also feels very appropriate to the idea of building community around and around suicide prevention. So I don't know if you can be like, go sanctuary, but
Well, since this is a gaming event and we have a couple minutes, does anybody want to share their favorite video game?
I mean,
Oh, I'm so sorry, I don't have one.
That's
What if
okay.
I said Pac-Man?
we would take it.
Would you,
You
like,
would be in a good
disconnect me?
crowd. Nope. This is a very retro heavy crowd, so they
I was
would.
gonna say, I think it'd be Mario Kart. That's
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
that's
that was the
fine.
game of my childhood.
Love it.
Okay. Love it. Grant, what about you?
So Diablo 2 is one of my favorites, even if I am bouncing back for D4 and BG3 right now. But a favorite of all time, Warlords 3, turn-based strategy. That's the throwback to 1994 for everybody else. That's where it's at.
Amazing.
Chat is blowing up, Grant. Gamer detected. So
No.
one of us.
I don't have the cred. I don't have the cred anymore. I have been long accused of just being into button mashing, and I accept.
No shame in that.
Maybe next year.
Mhm.
You are all welcome to join us next year, whether or not you are, a gamer elite like Grant, or an absolute noob. You are always welcome to join us. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If this is your first. If this is the first time checking in on Save&Raid this year, don't forget to go to our website, which will have the live schedule, who's up next, all the milestones and incentives. So all the crazy things you can make our participants do, or fun prizes you can get for donations. And as we move through the event, it is your one-stop shop for information about Save, crisis resources, as well as information about the event too. So I think we're ready to go. We are going to raid out. So thank you, everybody. This has been an amazing conversation. Really appreciate everyone's time and learning from you today.
Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.